About yourself to kick off?
Yeah, so it's cool because a couple people here that joined are, you know, from my high school, Cyrus being one of my teachers and Sierra being a fellow classmate. So graduated high school in 2007. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but one day I walked into a bakery with my parents and I saw a glazed fruit tart and I'm like, it looks like art. It's the coolest thing in the world. So I'm like, you know what, Mom, I think I want to go to culinary school. She's like, okay. So long story short, I decided to go to New England Culinary in Vermont, a ways from Ohio. Really cool, quaint culinary school. You know, you did 2 years internships. I was lucky enough to get with the Ritz-Carlton, learned a lot of techniques, banquets from there. Cooked in Australia for a year because I really wanted to get out of my comfort zone. Because being a chef, you only learn, you know, when you go to different kitchens and different styles, different techniques. It's kind of not like any other job where you like want to stay at a place for 20, 30 years. You kind of want to, oh man, if I stay here for 3 years and there for 5 years and there for 2 years, I'll pick up all the stuff and then you kind of come into your own. And then from there, I took a couple executive pastry chef roles in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, and then I got casted to be on the Holiday Baking Championship show, which is pretty nuts, very fun time. And then I got called to take the executive pastry chef job at the Met here in New York City, and I couldn't turn it down. So here we are. It's a little bit about me, and I have a son, and I have 3 cats. So there we go. So that's the intro. So do we want to get into the first recipe, or is that how we're going to kind of do things, right?
Yeah, let's start.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the scone recipe. Let me actually take my phone down a little bit here. Point it more towards the table. Okay, so I'm going to start with scones. So scones are very much like biscuits, right? They're basically a quick bread because they get leavened with chemical instead of yeast, right? So that's a live culture, yeast in your bread and stuff like that. Quick bread is any type of rising baked item with chemicals, baking soda, baking powder, that stuff, right? So we're going to start, if you have a bowl, if you have anything like that, we're going to start with our flour. So on the recipe, 3 cups or 708 grams of AP flour. I have everything scaled out to save a little bit of time as well. Okay. So probably the biggest thing with scones or anything like that is your butter. So I have the butter already cubed, if you can see that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to massage it in with my flour until it's roughly pea-sized, because you still want chunks of butter in any type of recipe like this because it adds flavor and it adds the steam we're looking for to give it a nice rise as well. So I'm doing everything by hand today because I do not have a mixer with me right now. Everything I own personally and everything's at work. So I'm going to do everything by hand. But if you have a mixer, by all means, use that because you'll get it done. You'll get it done pretty fast. And I'm also using cold butter as well because you want it cold so it doesn't melt in your hands because body temperature and mixers get pretty warm. So I'm just going to go ahead and knead this, and I'll point my camera to it when it's done so you can kind of see what it's going to look like when it is done. But if you're doing this with a mixer, you could probably get it done in 1 minute. Probably 1 minute flat. For me, with my hands, I can probably get it done in maybe about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes here, and get it done. And then after this, of course, I'll wash my hands and show you guys the rest to add the rest of our inclusions to finish this off as well. And then if you are baking these today, I'd get your oven ready at 350. That's pretty much the base temperature for anything in baking, besides if you're going to do like any type of custard or egg baked dish, be it a pot de creme, a creme brulee. You kind of want that at preferably around 300 degrees, even for cheesecakes as well. At the Ritz, we used to bake cheesecakes at 250 degrees for 13 hours, and they were absolutely perfect. But we had an overnight crew, so that helped out a lot. But the lower and slower for custard baked dishes, about medium for your everyday baked goods, sticky buns, cookies, brownies, cake. And then 425 to basically, if you can get your oven up to 600 degrees for bread, is basically the kind of little notion you want in your baked items here as well.
So I have a question about flour.
Yes.
So, one, I've learned that it's really careful how you measure flour. So like spooning in and leveling helps. But when do I know when it's important to sift and when is it not worth my time?
Okay, so I just talked about this with a buddy yesterday. So if you're ever weighing flour, right, I always do by weight, so grams. I do not use cups because in our industry, you know, if I have 13 people working and then I'm like, okay, Sally, is your cup the same as Mark's cup? It's never going to be the same. But if 700 grams is 700 grams, or was that about, I don't know, 10 ounces, you know, it's going to be the same. Sifting, this one you asked that. I really only sift if I'm doing a really light cake. Like if I'm adding sifted flour to like a meringue base, or if I ribboned yolks, I want to sift for that. And then especially if you're making macarons, I'll sift for that, where you know the texture has to be really light and airy, not to deflate. So basically, if your flour is going to be too heavy to deflate whatever product you're making, you want to sift it, especially in whipped items. But besides that, like if it's for cake and stuff like that, I'd never sift. So, but that's a great question. Oh my gosh. Okay, so my flour is just about ready. And I'll show you guys what it kind of looks like here. So just let me wash my hands first. So right now, my flour and butter looks like that. And so I have some decent sized chunks of butter in there, but I can also kind of hold it and it'll almost clump like wet sand. And that's how you know you kind of got the consistency right on your scone there. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my sugar. And the reason we didn't add our sugar with our flour, because if you add sugar to your flour and butter, it'll get trapped in the butter. You just kind of want to let it flow through your hands in your flour butter mixture. Because remember, we're not like cookies. You want to cream your sugar and butter together. Here we don't. So that's why we add it after we do our process here. The French term would be a beurre manger. Basically, you're massaging butter. So that is a little in there. So now we're going to go ahead and add our wet. So I'm going to add our egg and our cream. I'm going to use a spatula here. I'm just going to massage this together till it forms. And the one thing you want to know about these types of quick breads is you just want to mix it until it gets combined. Because if you overmix it, that's when you get a tough scone, tough biscuit, things like that. And you want it to be nice and moist and soft. So you just want to mix it until it's combined. And again, if you have a mixer, you can get this done so fast. But today we're going to sweat a little bit and do it by hand. Okay. So, there we go. So now my dough's come together pretty well. Let me see if I can actually throw it in like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my inclusion. So with the volumes I gave you, you can throw anything in here you want. If you have, you know, chocolate chips, walnuts, pecans, almonds, M&Ms, oats. So I just have my stuff here, and I'm going to add them last. I'm actually going to do this one by hand here with my knuckles. Go. Alrighty. So I'll wash my hands, but again, there, everything's in there. Nice, easy, simple. Right, if you excuse me one more time. So from there, I got my cutting board right here. I will place my, let me move this a little closer. Perfect, all right. Flour my surface. Just take a little bit of my dough. Flour over top. So I like my scones a bit thick. So I really go about that thick, you know, because if you go to any bakery and stuff like that, they're not really too thin. So if you have a rolling pin, you can rolling pin it out, but I've been doing it for a while. I can just go ahead and do it with my hands. There we go. And you can, if you have a circle cutter, you can cut these out. I like to, so personally for me, if you cut it with circles, you have that scrap. Usually rule of thumb is you don't want to roll out any dough like this more than twice. So you don't want to use your scrap 3 times or it's going to be really tough. So I don't like to waste, so I usually just cut mine into either squares or I'll cut it into rectangles and cut it in a bias to make triangles. So I will have a little bit here, but I'll be able to roll that out one more time and get pretty much no waste at all, which is good. You have a nice triangle there. And then I'll get my pan. And then if you have an egg wash, you could do half a cup of water with 1 egg, or if you want it a little more flavorful, you can do milk and 1 egg and throw some sanding sugar on there on top, maybe a type of crumble.
Dwight, we have a question. Are those about 1 inch thick?
Ooh, let me see here. Yeah, probably an inch or about an inch and a half. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
For the multiple cuttings, would you say the same thing for other like cookies, like sugar cookies, that you shouldn't keep rolling them out, or is that more for just now with the scones?
So I would say you could roll out cookies almost all day because they have an equal part usually flour to sugar ratio. For biscuits, things like of this nature, they have so much flour in them. If you roll them out a couple more times, they're going to get really tough.
Got it.
Yeah. There we go. So we have all of our pan right here. So you bake those at 350. I always bake. A lot of people get mad at me because they'll be like, "How long do I bake it?" And I tell them, "We'll bake it till it's done." So it's kind of funny, but you'll I like to feel. I don't like to go so much by time. So I'll maybe, if it's 350, I'll throw them in for 15 minutes. I'll look at them, feel them, and then if you touch anything like that and it just kind of has a little bit of bounce back to it, you know it's done. If you touch it and it has give to it, leave it in for a little bit longer. That's only for this instance as well, because obviously if you underbake cookies and stuff, it's going to be different. But for leavened products like this, you definitely want to bounce back a little bit and feel almost like a puffy cloud, then you know it's done. So move my cutting board here.
And that's okay to bake on parchment paper, right? I feel like parchment paper saves me.
Universal. And the good thing about parchment paper is you can use it over and over and over again. When I was at one of my first internships when I was, 17 years old, I was at a bakery and the owner would use parchment paper for months, because parchment paper is expensive when it comes commercial. But usually you can at least get 1 flip, 2 flip, probably 3 and 4 uses if you're not doing some crazy baking on it. But yeah, I reuse it over and over again until I think, yeah, time to get rid of it, So, and then of course, when they're nice and baked, you can do a glaze. So when I glaze, I do, let me see here. I do 10 times sugar, powdered sugar. And if you wanted an orange glaze, you could use orange juice. You could use grapefruit juice. You could use heavy cream if you want more of a meaty glaze. You could use any type of liquid you really want with the 10 times sugar, and it'll set. Even you could probably use wine if you really wanted to. Then I just did a nice thing on my baked product here. Nice, fluffy, beautiful on the inside. Really nice. So really easy.
Right.
Yes?
Could you use the same recipe and put fruit in it, like blueberries and cranberries?
Most definitely. Yep. You could. You could do fresh and dry. If you're going to do fresh, though, try not to massage it so much. You want to be really careful, because if you split it open, then you're just going to have this. It's going to be all blue or any type of color. You kind of want to be really easy with it.
Okay.
Yep. But of course. And then this recipe can be changed for a lot of things. So this recipe right here, take away the butterscotch chips, the walnuts, cut the sugar in half, and then you have a biscuit recipe. You can throw, chive in there. You can sub your butterscotch chips and walnuts for cheese or feta or something like that. And you can have a nice biscuit or anything like that too as well for this one. So it's pretty cool. Alrighty. So then, is everybody pretty okay with this? With the scones?
One quick question. What's sanding sugar?
Sanding sugar? Sanding sugar is it's really kind of coarse cut sugar. I get it through purveyors, from the food industry, but you could probably find it on Amazon. It's just really, it has a really nice crunch to it, and it's these big crystals that add so much texture and fun to when you're eating them.
It's more like the kind you use like in Belgian waffles.
In a sense, yes, but a little bigger.
Okay, cool.
A little bigger, yep. Yep, it's almost probably, take rock salt and break it with a hammer, and it's kind of these cool shards.
Thank you.
Of course. Alrighty, so now if everybody is content, I'll go on to the chocolate, which is my favorite, and it's probably my favorite ingredient in the past 13 years to work with. All right. So we're gonna start with the flourless chocolate cake. So the cool thing about this recipe is, as I'm looking at it right now, it is 100% gluten-free, which is pretty neat. Flourless chocolate cake is really easy to make, and this one doesn't even have you whip anything. It's 4 ingredients, and you can actually use this if you wanted to make cupcakes with this, if you wanted to make a layered cake with this, put any type of buttercream in between, any type of bar. You could throw inclusions in it and make a brownie cake. This recipe is very, very universal, and you can use it for a lot of different things. So we will start. Here we go. I'm going to use a double boiler. You could use a microwave to melt your chocolate and butter together if you just put it on for 30 seconds at a time, blast it. Because once you overheat your chocolate and burn it, there's no going back at all. So I'm going to put my butter and my chocolate in my bowl here.
Did you use squares of chocolate? Is that what that was?
Yeah, so I bought 66% chocolate bars, and I just chopped it up with a knife.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep, because the smaller the piece of chocolate are, the quicker it's going to melt.
Okay, great.
Yep. Pour here. So I have my bowl, have my double boiler right here. So just a pot, right? Double boiler, pretty easy. Just like that. And this will probably take about, I don't know, if I had my water boiling, probably about 2 minutes. Right now it might take maybe 4. So we'll just let this sit actually right now. Let it get all melted. And one thing about the double boiler is you do not want your bowl touching your water. You want the steam to do the work for you. So whatever your water level is, make sure your bowl is not touching your water and you'll be fine. So then you'll scale out your sugar, and then your eggs. And one thing about anything in these recipes, when I cooked overseas in Australia, they have different, health code than we do, stuff like that. I like to keep my butter and eggs out at room temperature, because when you're doing a recipe like this, even if you know you're going to bake in like an hour or so, take everything out and let it get to temper, because if all your ingredients are the same temperature, you're always going to have a great mix no matter what. People tend to get in trouble, especially with chocolate recipes. If some of their ingredients are really cold and they add to something hot, it's going to seize up like that. So always make sure you kind of take your ingredients out and have them warm up just a little bit. It'll just make life a lot easier for you in the long run. Yes, let's go ahead and check. Water, so nothing yet, but we're getting warm here. Oh, I'm sliding everywhere. And then with the middle, with this bar, once you have it baked, you can literally put anything in between this that you want, as long as you let it set up. So when I build a bar, I like to have it set up overnight, because the things in pastry will work better if you have it set up where you can do it a day ahead and cut it. So for this instance, if you're going to bake your flourless cake, your base, Let that at least get to room temperature before you put anything over top because you don't want it to melt right. Put that in the cooler no matter what it is. If you're going to do stabilized whipped cream, if you're going to do a chocolate mousse, if you're going to do a peanut butter mousse, no matter what, a caramel, you could do a really nice caramel in that, a toffee, dulce de leche. Throw that right back in your fridge or cooler, let that set, and then go ahead and throw your ganache on and let that set again. Because you'll get nice straight cuts when something is cold, opposed to filling it up room temp and cutting it, you know? And then you'll be able to pop it out whatever mold you have as well, being a baking pan, a sheet pan, cake pan, whatever have you. Alrighty, 1 second. Let me put this right. There we go. So I'm gonna stir this really quick and show you guys here. Alright, so we're getting farther here. So our chocolate is starting to melt and our butter is starting to melt along with our chocolate as well. So let me and then again, if you have a microwave, you could do this in the microwave if you want, but I like to do it this way because you do have more control. For one, you get to see it and you get to pull it out right when it's done. And you know, water doesn't get up to 212 degrees and it does not cook from the inside out like a microwave does. So you have a lot of control doing it this way opposed to a microwave. But then again, for me, for a microwave is a chef's best friend if you're going to just melt the chocolate by itself. Or if you want to melt butter by itself. Or if you want to even warm up cream or something like that to get it at room temp, be it milk or anything like that, it's great for that. Okay, so I got most of the big chunks out there. There we go. So getting nice and melted. I'm going to switch to a whisk because also I'm going to use this whisk to whisk in my sugar and my eggs. It would be just awful if I dropped my phone in there. So another method to Flourless chocolate cake would be if you wanted it. So this, I would say this one is a little bit more on the fudgy dense side. Definitely fudgy moist. If you wanted more of like a light airy stuff, you could always whip up your eggs. You could do it two ways. You could whip up your eggs whole and then pour your melted chocolate butter over that, fold it in and bake it that way. Or you could meringue your whites with your sugar, ribbon your yolks with half that sugar, fold that together, then fold your melted chocolate and butter in that. So there are many different ways to do this recipe, depending on what you have available to you. So, kill that. Ooh, that's hot. Okay. So nice, melted. So we're going to throw our chocolate in first. Sorry, sugar in first. We're going to whisk in a little bit by bit here. Now we're going to do our eggs one at a time. Now the reason you always see in recipes do it one at a time is because if you put all this either tempered cold or cold liquid into chocolate, it's going to seize no matter what. So add it in one at a time and whisk it till it's all incorporated, and then go for the next one. So I'll go 1, vigorously whisk, 2, vigorously whisk, 3, and
Dwight, is there any good alternative to sugar, like a non-sugar substitute that's good for baking?
I will say in this recipe, so sugar helps to add volume and sweetness to this, correct? For my recipes, or any, I guess if you go in the professional, they're all weighted by percentages in volume and weight. So the sugar, you'd have to substitute in this 100 grams of something because it needs that. I've messed around with like aspartame and stuff like that in a couple recipes, and it's turned out okay. But I would really have to look into it a little bit more to let you know how you can fine tune that to make it taste exactly like and bake like what it's supposed to. Because when you start using those sugar substitutes, they have a couple different chemicals that react differently to whatever ingredient you're using. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's kind of a tough one. I've definitely experimented with it before. I've had a lot of luck doing that with ice cream and sorbet and cold churn products like that. But I can't say I've ever done a lot of sugar substitute baking because I tend to like to indulge a little bit. So I have some fun, but I'll definitely look into it and get back with you on that because I've always definitely looked into that. And being in New York, a lot of people have been, asked about that and always have that being conscious, Okay, so we have our base here. So nice, very good. And for this one, you cannot, flour, so there's no gluten in that. It'll have a little bit of spring. It'll stand up on itself. So we call that in pastry a ribbon. If it can stand on itself and look like a ribbon, so that's, you got a good mix there. All right. Righty. So, there's a couple cool things about this recipe before I bake it. So you can turn this basically into a couple other things because it has no flour. So if what we have in it right now, if you doubled the eggs and baked it, you'd have a pot de creme. If you whipped cream, folded in this, you would have a mousse. If you took your eggs before you added them, if you cooked your eggs over a double boiler, whisk it till it tripled in size, then fold it in your butter, fold it in your melted chocolate, you'd have a bomb. So this recipe can turn into a lot of cool, fun things if you kind of research online and kind of look into what you can make it. So basically in, baking and pastry, we use the same ingredients, right? Butter, flour, sugar, salt, yeast, a lot of different things. And it can turn into almost anything. With 10 ingredients, you can probably bake everything there is to bake in this world, which is pretty cool. It's just different ratios, and that's why I like to bake with more percentages and grams than I do cups, because if you learn the ratios, stuff like that. So a really good book I like is How Baking Works. This will go through the science of it, and once you learn the science behind it, why you used it, why you use certain temperatures, why you use a whisk over a spatula, why do you whip cream to soft peak instead of stiff peak, you can really make anything you want once you learn those techniques. It's really cool. So we're going to add our batter to our baking dish here. Alrighty. Of course, with the magic here, we have one baked already. I'm going to show you how to layer it. So I tend to like my baked goods, personally for me, I like my stuff underbaked. I like my stuff very moist and gooey. So I baked mine for only about 20 minutes. And I was like, you know what, that's good for me. And then you learn your preferences. So we're going to layer this thing that I'll teach you. So I am using jam because, of course, in this pandemic, I could not find pectin or any type of thickening agent gelatin right now in the greater New York area. So you got to use what you have. Otherwise, I would have made the jam by hand. So I'm just going to spoon it out here and actually layer on top of my flourless cake here. And remember, again, you could do anything on top of that. You can make your dulce de leche if you take, sweetened condensed milk, put it in a pot of boiling water and boil it for about 3 hours. You got dulce de leche. You can make a salted caramel, pour it over it, pour your caramel over it, kind of tempered, let it set up, and then pour your ganache over. You could do a stabilized whipped cream if you have gelatin. You could do a lot of fun stuff. And usually in my line, I like to do things things by threes if I'm going to layer something like that, because your odd numbers look better to the eye. And then, of course, everybody likes layers and likes different flavors and something like that as well. That's why I'm not doing chocolate. I'm doing chocolate strawberry chocolate for this one.
Is that about an 8-inch square pan?
Yes, it is. Yep, it's about 8-inch. Usually, if I was going to do this professionally, I would do probably a 42-inch, nice big one. But yes. And all that batter went in my pan. So that recipe, all that batter went in, and it probably baked about, I'd say, about 2 inches high. About 2 inches high it baked. Because you want the flourless to be the focal point of your bar. Okey-dokey. So I got my jam all over there, right? So now if you have time, I would throw this bad boy in. For me, I throw it in the freezer for probably an hour, or the cooler for about 2 hours to let it set, to make it nice and cold before you add your ganache. All right, bear with me 1 second while I take this out. Okay, so now we're going to make our ganache, which if you go online, you can probably find 100 different recipes for it. Some have butter, some have caro syrup. Butter will give you a more of like a milky flavor. Caro syrup will make it really, really shiny. You could sub caro syrup for honey if you wanted to give it kind of a cool flavor that not a lot of people guess. But I'm going to basically do chocolate, my heavy cream, a little bit of sugar to give a little bit of sweetness, and a little bit of salt and vanilla. I like to add probably 1% by weight salt to every single recipe I do, because salt just enhances flavor of any type of baked item you make. As well as there's two things that enhance the flavor of chocolate: vanilla and coffee. Coffee really makes chocolate explode just a little bit. Like if you have coffee extract, or if you brew a cup of coffee, you could add it. It just really ramps up the flavor of chocolate a lot, especially dark chocolate as well. So I have my chocolate, I have my cream. I'm gonna go over here. And then for ganaches, you can do any percentage of chocolate you want, depending on how bitter you want your ganache to be. So classic ganache is equal parts chocolate and cream. Of course, you can, you know, throw sugar or salt in it like I always do. But then if you're going to do a milk chocolate's obviously looser than bitter. You want to do less cream so it sets up. And the darker you get your chocolate, you want to just be equal parts. It's usually for me, if the chocolate is over 42%, I will do equal parts. If it's under, I would do like 100% chocolate to half cream. So if you did 200 grams of milk chocolate, I would only do 100 grams of cream because that'll let your ganache set up. Because if you would do equal parts there, your ganache would just almost be like a chocolate sauce opposed to a nice thick ganache that you want. So go ahead and heat your cream, sugar, salt over here. We're going to bring it to a boil. And I add my vanilla to my chocolate itself because you don't want to boil your vanilla out. So I like to always add my vanilla cold to any type of thing I'm mixing it in. So we're probably about a minute out. So I'm going to set it right here. There we go. I'm going to bring my heated sugar over. Heated sugar, cream over in about 20 seconds here. Alrighty, so we're starting to bubble up here. I'll wait till the bubbles get in the center. And there we go, I'll take it off. Pour my scalded cream over my chocolate.
So in the bowl, did you just have the chocolate sitting in there and then you just put the other stuff right on top?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Correct. And then I will let this set for probably about a minute. So all of that heat will melt the chocolate. So when you whisk it, it'll all just whisk nice and get nice and melty. Because if I start whisking now, it's going to probably take a little bit and it could possibly break. So with ganache, you just want to let it sit, forget about it for about a minute or two, let that heat really melt all that chocolate. Because the only thing that melts chocolate is heat and agitation. Those are the two things that, you know, you need both of them to melt chocolate. Hence why, you know, chocolate chips don't melt because they don't get agitated, they just get the heat. So.
Great, thanks.
Yep, of course. So let that sit for a little bit. Alrighty. And there's a lot of stuff too you can do with leftover ganache as well. If you have a KitchenAid or if you're strong enough, you can actually whisk it until it gets nice and fluffy, which could be almost like a faux mousse or even a filling for a cake. Again, if you had gelatin and heavy cream, you could whip your heavy cream, melt your gelatin with your chocolate and cream, fold that in and make a mousse. So there's a lot of fun things you can do. It can be a filling, it could be a bar if you have different molds. It can just, it's so versatile what you can do with this. You could even have your ganache hot while it's still warm, pour it over eggs. You could bake that to make a chocolate creme brulee as well. So there's just so much stuff you can do once you have that knowledge of knowing your ingredients and your ratios and things like that. Just great. So now I'm going to start to whisk it here. See if I can get this camera over. So there's your easy ganache done and done. Hey. And then we're just gonna do our ganache over. We have our bars here. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in my freezer. And then you have a nice little, cool little bars right there. I made a quick, so I didn't temper this chocolate. You can make really cool, if you have the time, and if you don't want to temper chocolate, you can just go ahead and melt any type of chocolate as long as it's over 42%. Melt it, make any design you want over parchment paper, and just throw it in the fridge. And that's what we call cooler tempering. If you're like, for us in the industry, like, if like, oh my gosh, I forgot this chocolate garnish, what am I going to do? Okay, cooler temper it, get it done really fast. But of course, you know, I'll take the time and temper chocolate. I threw a little bit of almond crumble on top. And even if I had time, with this recipe, you could even bake your flourless base, have it baked. You could pour cheesecake batter over it, bake the cheesecake, right? And then go ahead and throw your ganache over that. Just make these really cool things where people are like, oh my God, how did he or she do that, you know? And that's always kind of fun to do, right? It's kind of fun to bake that. Oh, how did you do that? Well, you know, family trick. So, and that is basically the demo, how to make a lot of cool things. And, you know, I know with everything going on, a lot of people have time to bake, right? So just experiment. And I can tell you in 13 years, I have failed a lot doing stuff. Like, you'll be like, oh, why didn't it work? You know, I did everything it said. So just watch a video. If you have any questions, you can, you know, shoot me a message on Instagram or something like that. I'd be happy to answer it, and just have fun baking and learn about it. But a couple of things I can tell you is always make sure your oven's at the right temp. Have all your ingredients scaled out, right? So get all your mise en place done first. There's nothing, so we call it mental mise en place in the kitchen. Get everything scaled out first. Don't scale the sugar, then add the sugar. Scale the eggs, add the eggs. Scale all at once. So then you're focused, like, okay, it's all done. Then you can really concentrate on the technique of what you're doing and look at it through that way. And it's actually quicker to do that way as well. A couple of things, as I said, I like to keep all my ingredients basically the same temperature, because then you can never fail. Nothing can ever break on you, especially when it comes to chocolate. And when you're trying to make it on glaze, or you're trying to temper hot and cold, you're like, oh man, why did it break, or why did it curdle, stuff like that. Unless you're trying to do something a little more advanced. And then I see a lot of people baking bread. somebody sent me a message, oh, I baked my bread, but it didn't get brown on top. Bread will only brown on top, if you burn it, or you need steam. So throw a few ice cubes in your oven. I like to squirt water in my oven because the steam will get on the dough, and that steam mixes with the sugar called Maillard reaction, and that's what caramelizes the outside of any type of bread. So you want that high steam to get on your dough, and then that's when you get that nice, beautiful crust when you do a bread like that. And then for me, I always like to underbake, because then let's say you make brownies or cookies. If you bake them, all the way, then they set for a couple days and they get hard. I like to underbake so they stay moist throughout. And then one other thing, I like to freeze a lot of my stuff, because let's say if you bake this flourless and you freeze it, sugar is hygroscopic and it will suck in all that moisture from the freezer or the cooler, and then you'll always be left with a moist product. Like for instance, if you bake a cake, I might kill your fridge because you don't have a really big, industrial cooler. But if you don't have that, then throw plastic wrap over it. Because a lot of people use simple syrup. You never have to use simple syrup or cake syrup. If you just, right when it comes out of the oven, throw plastic wrap, and it'll keep all that moisture inside, and you'll always be left with a nice moist product at the end of the day. Is there any questions or anything, what you've seen, or maybe if you have something on your mind that you've always wanted to know, like how does that work, or anything like that, please feel free to shoot or let Vaso know, and I'd be happy to answer either today or tomorrow, whenever you have any questions or anything. But for that, thank you very much for watching me bake for the first time in, geez, I don't know, 9 weeks? 9 weeks? Oh my gosh, I'm itching to get back in the kitchen so bad. So.
What are some of the things that you will be making at the Met when you reopen?
Oh my gosh. So the cool thing is with that is we have different wings in the Met. So we have a French wing, an Asian wing. So I'm going to try to, make mochi for the first time in my career for the Asian wing. I have a whole list of the plated desserts like pave, sticky toffee pudding, different types of cookies, brownies, blondies, ice cream, gelato, croissants, danishes, muffins, quick breads. I mean, anything you could name, we make from scratch, which is always pretty fun there, because we have it's New York City. We have a pretty sophisticated clientele and feed about, on a busy day, 5,000 people, and it's pretty cool because all of it's house made and it's pretty neat, So I'm just excited to go back in and start experimenting. And this downtime has given me a lot of ideas of, I can't wait to do this when I get back, or, so I'm just really excited to get back and bake.
When will we see you on Food Network again?
So, but I could probably say it. So I was reached out to do another show, but all that got canned when all this happened because it set production back, and I wasn't going to go on the same show because I kind of want to go on more of a, I don't know, like a sophisticated show, something that's more technical. So hopefully probably 2021 will be the next time, go on there, and this time try to win.
Cool.
Not be brought down by an igloo cake. But it was fun, met a lot of good people, and I still keep in contact with everybody from that show. We talk all the time, and especially through this time with the food industry, it's been hit pretty hard, and we always just, help each other up, lift each other's spirits, and know that this will pass and we'll have fun again, So.
Anybody else have any questions, thoughts?
I have a question. So
Yeah.
I've gotten really, Vaso knows this, I've gotten really into baking layered cakes.
Yeah, okay.
My kids are a mess, work is a mess, but I can make a cake.
Awesome.
So I've been making lots of layered cakes. But I've only done the basics. I've done a lot of, I made my daughter a unicorn cake, but what kind of different flavors would you put together? I saw lavender and lemon buttercream, and I was like, okay, I need to start thinking through, what are fun things I can experiment with?
Yeah, so I tend to go, I guess I'm maybe more classical with that, but when I layer something, I like to do more textures. So for instance, for me, I'm like, okay, one time I made an 8-layer chocolate cake. Every layer had chocolate in it somehow, but it was a different texture. So I did chocolate cake, chocolate ganache, chocolate mousse, chocolate cremeux, chocolate and fouilletine, chocolate whipped cream, and I did a chocolate en glace, but I put it in the cooler. I froze it, and then I layered it frozen. And then you can also layer creme brulee. So I did chocolate creme brulee. I layered that in the middle as well. capped it with the ganache and cut it. Because I think in pastry, there's nothing more fun than eating something with all these different textures. It makes it so much fun to eat. So that's how my mind works. And then once I have the textures, I'm like, okay, what do I want this texture to be? What do I want this to be? Do I want chocolate with a little bit of a kick? Do I want some blood orange in there? Okay, but do I want to make it classic? Do I maybe want cinnamon in one layer to give it that, oh my God, what's that little kick in there that I don't really know, to kind of make people guess. But if you tend to think of your textures over your flavors, then that'll be kind of cool. Because then your textures will like, oh, I know what can give me that crunchy texture. That's what I'm going to add to my layer cake this time. So that's how I kind of think about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Dwight.
Thank
It's
you, Cyrus.
It's nice seeing you work.
It's a
Makes me
pleasure.
proud. We're all very proud of you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Love you, brother.
Love you.
Dwight, I don't know if you can see this comment from Annette Birch. She says, thank you. I will make the scones on Sunday. Your brother Aaron is a coworker of mine, and he is very proud of you.
No way. How cool. Wow. That's awesome. That is so cool.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Really can't thank you enough, Dwight. This was awesome.
Oh,
Thank
and
you.
anytime you need me.
Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you.
We'll be your taste testers anytime too. Just ship them our way.
I shall ship them your way, but come up to New York sometime when all this is over.
Right. That sounds
Please.
good.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
Hi.
Enjoy all the desserts, Dwight.
Oh, I will.